Underrated, we the underdogs, underestimated, yeah. Underrated, we the underdogs, underestimated, we the underdogs, underestimated.
It's the Underdogs back with you for a playoff-packed NFL show. I am Jordan Brenner, joined as always by Peter Keating and a special guest this week. You know him from the Dan Le Batard Show. You know him as one of the hosts of God Bless Football. You know him as a longtime fan of the Underdogs podcast. He is Billy Gil. Billy, welcome to the show finally.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. I'm very excited, as you mentioned. I'm a super fan of the show, and today I learned dreams do come true.
I want to say that Billy had my favorite single moment on the Le Batard Show of 2024 when he recommended betting the Marlins on a Marlins Yankees game, and Dan said, "How could you possibly bet on the Marlins?" And he said, and this is Jordan Brenner's favorite line, in case you didn't know. He said, "Because it's baseball, Dan."
That's right. That's right. And look, we are part of the Le Batard and Friends network. So now I feel like we're a little bit better friends today. So it's a big step for us, Billy.
I felt like we were always friends. I mean, I feel like I listen to you guys, and I'm just one of the guys, you know?
Well, look, it is divisional weekend coming up. We just got through a pretty crappy wild card weekend. So let's go through these games and talk about whether we can actually have a better time watching them. Because, man, this season is just kind of, I'm going to be flat out honest. The NFL sucked this year. So it's got 3 weeks left to change it around. So let's roll. All right. Starting off Saturday, a little team called the Kansas City Chiefs. You may have heard of them. Hosting the Houston Texans. Chiefs are favored by 7.5. A, how impressed with the Texans were you against the Chargers? B, we know the Chiefs are vulnerable, or the Texans a team that can take them out?
I wasn't very impressed with the Texans last week. I don't know if you guys felt the same way. It seemed like the Texans and the Chargers were both competing to see who could blow that game. And the weird thing about the Texans is this was the year that everybody thought C.J. Stroud and them would take it to the next level, and they've kind of been disappointing. But the Chiefs also seemingly have been slightly off from what we've expected from the Chiefs, even though they've kind of hit their stride here towards the end of the season. But with having the number 1 seed in the bye, they've also gotten a lot of rest. So I don't know how, and you guys would have better insight on this, how the betting public feels about the fact that they haven't really played a real game with their starters in like 3 weeks now.
I was watching that game and I was thinking, as we try to predict underdogs, we really need to figure out, NFL teams vary so much in week to week in their performance, right?
Mhm.
And I just wish we had some gauge. We got to come up with some way to tell when a team's about to play its worst game of the season. Like, it's like, what was going on in that game? What was going on with Green Bay? I mean, there were several with Denver. I mean, there were games that we didn't expect to happen, but even the ones where we did expect to happen, there were teams playing some bad football, and everything we thought about the Texans was true, except they played at the very top of their range, which was enough to win.
I think we talked about this a little bit offline, Peter, when we were working on our piece for The Athletic, and we about which underdogs had the best chance of making a long run. And I think I kind of felt like the 2 worst teams in the playoffs were the Chargers and the Texans. Now, the most underrated unit in the playoffs might have been and continue to be the Texans defense, and we saw it step up. If the offense were functioning at the level we thought it would, with a competent offensive line, Tank Dell and Stephon Diggs, that team could have, to Billy's point, made the progress we expected in year 2 of CJ Stroud, but the offense has fallen apart. And you could see they can't open up any holes in the run game for Joe Mixon. There's one weapon in the passing game in Nico Collins. That's why I think we all agree. Well, certainly Peter and I agree, and Billy, we'll get your take a little more on where Kansas City stands. We've all agreed it's sort of a smoke and mirrors and Mahomes figure it out type situation, but that they're probably not as good a team this year as Buffalo and the Ravens. I just don't think the Texans are the team to exploit that. I'm probably going to stay away from this on the spread, but I love it as a teaser piece. The most valuable teasers, for those of you who don't know, are ones where you can take 6 points in either direction and move it past 7 and 3. Shout out to Stuckey at the Action Network, who's written great stuff about this. So I love the idea of being able to tease the Chiefs down from 7.5 to 1.5. I locked that in with another game right away that we'll talk about later. I see the Chiefs winning. I see the Chiefs winning probably a close game, but not comfortable enough to say, all right, I'm going to take the Texans plus 7.5. Guys, any difference of opinion there?
I mean, look, you try to boil things down to a simple stat if you can. Since Stephon Diggs went down in week 9, Houston is 27th in the NFL in expected points added per play. That offense is not working. Their games have gone under a lot. This is an interesting thing. 11 games went under for the Texans. Was something interesting to look at. But yeah, I think you're right. I don't think the Chiefs are going to get past anyone else, but I think they can get past the Texans.
Billy, big picture, buying or selling Kansas City as a Super Bowl team?
Ooh, Super Bowl team? Probably selling. The Chiefs are in like a good spot here where this first playoff game is very winnable. And then with the way that the playoffs have set up, then you're going to have the narrative of either Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson coming and finally ascending if they beat the Chiefs and making it to the Super Bowl, which has eluded them all of these years. And it may not even be because they've done anything. It may just be because the Chiefs are slightly off. I have a question about that stat that you just gave us about Stephon Diggs and the Texans, because it's interesting, especially when you looking at the games, he didn't really seem to have much of an impact, but then him not being there, I guess, based on the stat, really impacted the offense.
Yeah,
go Peter.
What I was just going to say, I think we both thought that Stroud regressed a little this year, which, by the way, is something everyone should have expected, right? I mean, he came in as a Hall of Famer. He's still on a Hall of Fame path. The offensive line had some issues this year, and in conjunction with the other injuries, like not having the deep threat, I think really did. Teams were just able to stuff them again and again and again.
Yeah, I think it's a combination, Billy, that, and you saw it with Tank Dell too, wasn't quite at the level we thought he was going to be after his rookie season. But it's almost like I liken it to basketball, right? Where the concept of gravity, where if you have shooters on the floor, they still draw attention. And they may not have been funneling targets to these guys, or they may not have been able to hit them on their optimal route tree because of the offensive line. But at least having them on the field limited the amount of attention you could pay to Nico Collins. Now they can't protect, and you can double Nico constantly, and there aren't a lot of other places to go. I mean, you guys with me on that?
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, let's move.
Yeah.
let's move on.
That's more analysis than this kind of crappy playoff team at this point of year deserves, I think. But that's
Well, let's move on. And look, I should also say that over the past 20 years, the division round has been very kind to underdogs. They're according to the Bet Lab stats, they are 48-34-1 against the spread. That's about 58.5%. So just blindly betting underdogs in the division round has been fairly lucrative. Now we'll head to Detroit. Speaking of a team that's been banged up, injury compromised, they are 9.5-point favorites against the Commanders. I got a rogue 7.5-point line when this opened, and was, like I mentioned, I was able to tease this.
Was it an offshore site somewhere, Jordan? What's a rogue 7.5?
It was there for a second, and then it was 9.5 and 10 everywhere. So
did you bet in dollars, American dollars?
I really have a problem, I think. But this, so I teased this. I teased the Lions down to 1.5. Now 9.5, guys. That's a lot of points to give Jaden Daniels against a defense that's pretty suspect. Billy, what's your read here?
It's a huge line. I mean,
yeah.
It just look. I was gonna say it doesn't feel like 9.5 in the playoffs is something that you want to get close to, but most of these playoff games haven't been close so far, right? I don't think that that's going to be the case with the Commanders and the Lions, but 9.5 is so many points.
I mean, Jordan, one of the reasons why underdogs will probably have that record you are citing in the divisional round is probably because this is the point where the public sees 3 or 4, maybe 2 really good teams per conference and bets heavily on them, right? This is the point of the time where people look at the Commanders and say, if they were to lose, even if they were going to get blown out, fantastic season. Who cares? They're playing the best team in football. And so, I mean, I think the spread's too big. I mean, I also think there's a small chance that with this week of rest that Detroit has had, banged up and all, we talk a lot about the Baltimore and Kansas City and Buffalo and the teams under the Lions and the predictive metrics. The Lions, by any measure you want to use statistically, are really the best team in football. I mean, there is a small chance the Lions are just going to steamroller everyone to a championship.
So Yes, certainly possible. I'll point out that the stat I mentioned about underdogs in division round, it carries through when there's the line's more than a touchdown. It's exactly half the games. It's and the same percentage, 24, 17, and 1, still 58.5%. Underdogs are more than a touchdown. Here's where I'm having trouble, okay? It's because of what the Lions did to the Vikings. I'm with you. I thought a healthy Lions team with a healthy defense was the best team in football, and then some. They are still so banged up. They've lost so many key pieces that I've said on the show that I thought Philly would go in there and beat them if it comes to that. The Commander, I, this could be a very high scoring game. I know they messed up Sam Darnold, but you know what? The Rams messed up Sam Darnold last night too.
Yes,
I'm
they
still
did.
very skeptical of this defense, and Jaden Daniels is a special player playing special football right now. So I'm
Okay, what's the most fun stat of the entire season? There are now 6. It was 5, which I thought was incredible. There are now 6 games this year where Jaden Daniels has thrown a touchdown in the last 30 seconds of the game, either regulation or overtime. 6! 6. I think it's probably going to happen again this week. It's just probably going to get them closer, not win the
Oh,
game.
you like the back door with the Lions?
Yeah,
All right.
I don't know. But I
Billy,
would.
Jaden Daniels, rookie, road game, Detroit, hostile environment. Is this guy going to show any warts at any point?
I mean, my only concern with him is his health, which is crazy because he's been durable. I mean, he's had like rib injuries. Last week he got cut in the face. It wasn't a big play that led to anything serious, but the way that he was just thrown out of bounds makes me wonder how durable he's going to be, because when he's on the field, he has him in every game. And if he has the ball at the end of the game, rookie or not, you need to be scared because he brings the Commanders back in every game in the last couple minutes there. But if something were to happen, I wonder where they're going to be if he's off the field. You said that you like the points and you think it's going to be high scoring. Do you think that the 55.5 over under is a good number for that game?
I feel like I have to reflexively not bet over 55.5 just because it's such a huge number.
Fat number, yeah.
So I'm probably going to stay away from that. But if I had to pick a side, I think the Commanders are the side getting 9.5. But I do have to remind myself this has been a historic year for favorites. Like sometimes you have to take a step back, and we do this in college basketball a lot, Peter, and look at the bigger narrative. And the bigger narrative we've been talking about all season long is there are these 5 teams that seem to be a cut above everybody else. And it's and at the bottom of the league is really bad. So we saw the favorite narrative again play out in the wild card round. So you can certainly argue persuasively, why should that change now?
Well, look, somebody's going to get to Daniels. He takes a lot of sacks given the amount of pressure he's under. And so, in other words, adjusting even for the fact that he scrambles a lot and he's out there getting contact, he takes a lot of sacks. Now, I think Detroit, despite the injuries, with the talent, with the coaching, with the schemes, still has the ability to do that. I think they're going to get to him.
All right, let's move to Sunday, 3:00. The Rams, fresh off their dismantling of Sam Darnold and the Minnesota Vikings.
What the hell was that game? That was a crazy game.
They head to the Eagles. They're
last week.
Say it again.
The Lions, they stole the Vikings' soul in that game. They came out and they had nothing. Yes.
Do you think Dan Campbell will actually walk out with that soul like in a glass bottle for the start of his game?
We should talk about that for a minute, because Jordan, if you look at it, Minnesota actually won 14 games.
Yep.
Their expected wins were only 11 point something. They're due to regress, and Darnold looked shattered. I mean, that game against the Rams may have cost the Vikings cost Darnold who knows how many millions of dollars, and cost the Vikings a big chunk of their expectations for next season. It was pretty bad.
Yeah. So the Rams are getting 6 points in Philly. Billy, what do you got?
Sorry, there was also, I don't know if you guys noticed, there was the pattern this year of the Vikings' 4 losses. It was Lions, then followed by Rams. And then it was Lions, followed by Rams again. The Lions both times seemed to just steal the soul of the Vikings for the next game as well.
There's a narrative, I forget what the stats back up, but there was for a while, there was an incredibly poor record of teams the week after playing the Lions. And the theory was they are so physical that they leave a lasting impact on the team they played. And it's tough to recover right away. I will say that they had the first matchup was the worst of all worlds. Not only did they play the Lions, they came back and played the Rams on a short week on a Thursday night. So I don't know how you get ready after that, but last night was a disgrace. They had an extra day and they still stunk. Sorry. So the Rams, meanwhile, have they found something late in the season? They're getting 6 at Philly. Is this just a totally different beast. I know which way I'm leaning, guys, but what are you thinking here?
I think the Eagles are going to make the Super Bowl, and I think the Rams had a great game against Minnesota, but I don't see where they match up well at all here. And I just want to shout out a tribute to Philadelphia. I watched a lot of Eagles games. We all did 2 years ago. Last year, for an entire half a season, the back half of the season, they got torched by throws over the middle. This year, they went out and drafted 2 guys for the secondary. Those 2 guys have been great. Philadelphia can no longer be thrown on, and everything else about their game is the same or better. They're a great team looking to run over the Rams, is what I think.
It does seem like this might be where the Rams story ends. The Eagles just this season have been so good, especially since their bye week. I think they've only lost like 1 game since the bye. Do you guys think, not that this is, the show that's going to be putting people on the hot seat and firing people, but
we should really make that a part of the show. So,
Yeah.
do you think that Nick Sirianni is finally going to be left alone by Eagles fans if he makes it to the NFC Championship game, or is it Super Bowl or bust? And even then, do they have to win a Super Bowl to finally get off his back?
Oh, no, because they're insane people. Not for any rational reason. It's just you said the 2 words, Philly fans. They're freaking crazy.
I think they might not be satisfied even if they win a Super Bowl, but it's not a revenge game against the Chiefs. I think the Philly fans want some kind of barnstorming game against Patrick Mahomes in the offseason and beat them then, and then only then might they be satisfied.
Look, we are Giants fans on the show. Peter, me, our producer Sarah. So no one wants to see Philly implode more than we do, but like that's why I feel like we're even like more legitimate when we talk about how good they are, because we don't want them to succeed in any way. So this is a really good, balanced team. I think some of the Jalen Hurts criticism is unfair. They can beat you a lot of different ways. This is a Super Bowl team.
Against Green Bay, Jalen Hurts had like 39 yards passing through 3 quarters, and they still took care of him. They didn't need him.
Going back to last week with the Eagles, when Saquon dives where he could run into the end zone and get people, win prop bets for a lot of people, do your mind melt?
Not only the prop bets, I actually texted my dad at that moment. I said the number of DFS contests and best ball contests that just completely changed here on the DraftKings network. I can't remember a play quite like that, because that's a 76-yard touchdown run. So I think that's 13.6 fantasy points. I mean, that would have absolutely tilted outcomes of some of these big money contests. So I think people were probably ready to strangle him. Or conversely, if you had the under or you're going against those guys, you were very, very big Saquon fans.
I like the stat about how many 70-yard touchdown runs he had ripped off in the fourth quarter of games. And now that comes with like an asterisk. Like this should have been one of those, but it wasn't.
All right, I'm going to force you guys to make a pick on this one. Rams +6. Who you got?
I'm going to go Eagles.
Yeah, me too.
Points, but I think I'm going to go Eagles.
Yeah.
All right, so that's all 3 of us, which means anyone listening should definitely bet on the Rams. Last up, not only the game of the weekend, maybe the game of the year, maybe the 2 best teams in football. Ravens at Bills. I saw this line open at 1.5, Bills -1.5. It's moved all the way to the Ravens favored by 1.5 on the road. Over-unders 51.5. Guys, the floor is yours. I'm just excited to watch this.
Jordan, this is my Super Bowl. I think these are the 2 most fun, talented teams to watch. If one of these teams ends up playing, the Chiefs or somebody, it's going to be almost anticlimactic. I want to know why, like, what do you guys think about what the keys are to Buffalo's success? Because I look at the numbers. I've watched some of the games. Why do people think Josh Allen has had as good a season as Lamar, let's say? Who are Buffalo's threats the way that every time I watch the Ravens, it's impossible for the other team, look at Pittsburgh, to cover all the Ravens' threats? I'm not sure. I mean, the Bills have won, right? So what keeps them in a class as close to the Ravens as this spread and as close as everybody thinks? Because I just look at the Ravens and I see at this point in the year, especially since the Kyle Hamilton move on the defense, they're hard. It's hard to see what unit is better on the field than any unit of the Ravens at this time.
I mean, I think your hope, if you want a great game, right, is just that the Bills offense is going to keep up with the Ravens, which we haven't seen in a lot of the Ravens games, right? But also, last week the Ravens held the ball for twice as long as the Steelers held the ball. So the Steelers had to score essentially every time they had the ball, and even then they couldn't do it enough to keep up with the Ravens. The Bills basically have Josh Allen, and he's made everyone else, a weapon on the team. I think they have the NFL record, or they tied the NFL record for most offensive players who've scored a touchdown in history, just because they don't really have that go-to guy, so they're just spreading it around amongst everyone else. The MVP thing is so interesting because if you're supporting Josh Allen, it's basically just because he's had the moments in primetime games. So you saw it happen and you said, you know what, that's the MVP right there. Where Lamar has just quietly had a better season than he had his MVP season last year. But it's almost expected of him, where we came into the season thinking the Bills, are they even going to win their division? Which is crazy because they didn't have any competition in the division. They wrapped up the division. I think they were the earliest team to wrap up the division this year. It wasn't close, the AFC East. And there were just no expectations for them this year. So you saw him do it. You saw him go on the fourth down runs for touchdowns, and everyone said, "Oh, that's the MVP." Well, not really paying attention to what Lamar was doing, because that's just what Lamar does, and you expect it from him.
All right. Before we wrap, I just want to. I think you guys are underselling the Bills, and I think the most underrated component of their team is their offensive line. It's not just that Josh Allen is great. They open up holes in the run game. They give him time to find a lot of different receivers. I think you saw James Cook. They limit his workload in the regular season. I nailed escalator props on him. His over rushing. I knew once the playoffs hit, they were going to use him a lot more, and he killed it. The Bills can score. I'm most worried about the Bills' defense against the Ravens, but it's going to be a great game. Guys, we're out of time. I'm so sorry. Billy, we could talk to you about football for an hour. Come back. Don't be a
Sure.
stranger.
Please, anytime.
I'm just glad you didn't make us pick Ravens Bills.
Oh, pick Ravens Bills. Let's go out on that.
See.
I'm sorry. Oof.
All right. Well, it's time for Under the Week. Under the Week is brought to you by DraftKings. What's better than watching football and basketball on the weekend? Watching it with the DraftKings Sportsbook app in your hand. Our partner DraftKings is going to hook up all new customers who bet $5. They'll get $150 in bonus bets instantly. And Peter, we've got a fun under. Let's go to the game of the week. It's the Bills. It's the Ravens. The over-under is 51.5. And at first glance, you're thinking two high-powered offenses over, right?
Yeah, Jordan, but I think this is actually a sneaky case of where they go high, we go low.
That's right. So both teams were over teams in the regular season. The Ravens were 14-3 to the over. The Bills were 11-6. But some interesting things happened when the totals crept up here, okay? The Ravens built a lot of that over reputation on spreads that were lower, below 47. When the total moved to 47 or higher, Ravens went 4-6 to the over. When it was above 50, they were 1-4 to the over. The Bills, a similar situation. When the total got above 47, they were only 4-4. They only played one game with a total over 50 the whole season. It was that crazy 48-44 game against the Lions, but we'll forget that one. So if you crunch the numbers, yes, both teams high-powered offenses over teams in general, but in high totals, not so much. Interesting defensive stat for you as well, and then I'll get your thoughts here. The first 11 weeks of the season, the Bills were 9th in defensive expected points added. It's sort of a catch-all stat to tell you how well your defense is doing per play. They were 9th. The Ravens were 24th. Famously, the Ravens moved Kyle Hamilton to free safety. Since week 11, they've been number 1, but the Bills very quietly have dropped down to 21st in defense since week 11. Last thing I'll mention is in the division round, Peter, the under hit in 5 of 6 games. So are you with me on this? Are we looking for a sneaky under here?
Yeah, look, it's not just that Baltimore improved after week 11. They improved by a remarkable and almost comical margin. I mean, since they shifted Kyle Hamilton in those last few weeks, since week 11, the Ravens have allowed 4 passing touchdowns. And while getting 4 interceptions, league low opponent passer rating, highest EPA per play in the league. Meanwhile, for the season as a whole, Jordan, these two teams, this is what you got to keep in mind. Baltimore ranking number 1 in the NFL, Buffalo ranking 4th in expected points allowed in rushing defense. So they're both great defenses. Low, under.
There we go. All right. We got some room to work with. A 51.5 is a high total, so we'll go under in the Ravens-Bills game.
Under of the Week is sponsored by DraftKings. Download DraftKings Sportsbook app now. New customers use our promo code Underdogs, as in the title of our show, and bet just $5 on any wager. You get $150 in bonus bets instantly. That's promo code Underdogs, only at DraftKings Sportsbook. The crown is yours.
All right. Well, it's been a year of favorites. Peter, you're my favorite. Billy, you're getting to be my favorite. On that note, we'll see you soon.